Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Council Chamber, North Somerset Council, for this public forum with our police force. May I just introduce to you the Avon and Somerset Police and Crime Commissioner, Sue Mountstevens, our Chief Constable, Nick Gargan, and our Chief Superintendent, Nikki Watson. The format of the meeting is fairly straightforward. We will have an introduction by Sue and by Nick, and then Chief Superintendent Nikki Watson will do a presentation, followed by question and answer session and discussions on various police issues and proposals. We expect to round up by about 9 o'clock. I think that's a close of play if we get that far. If you could keep your questions till the end, there will be a roving mic over there, waving in the corner, who will come round to give you the microphone. You can't use these in the meantime. They will be switched off so that you'll only be controlled from the front. So I'll hand you over to Sue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me at the back, but I'm sure that you'll wave to me if you can't. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. It's a pretty grotty evening, and I'm delighted that so many of you decided to come here rather than sit in front of a cosy fire and watch television. So much appreciated. Just before I start, I would just like to say, I don't know whether some of you heard about the abhorrent one of the crimes that happened in Weston this weekend was that, and I just wanted to just talk about it just because I feel very passionately that the unacceptable behaviour that took place. For those of you who are unaware, two very callous individuals slashed the face of an unsuspecting man in a wheelchair before stealing his mobile phone and some cash. And I realise that this might sound very operational, and one of the things I'm going to talk about is that I'm not operational. But I wanted to reassure you that things like that happen is very, very rare. But if anyone did have any information, and if they would want to come forward and phone 101, I think it's important that these very heartless offenders are brought to justice. And you know, I think that we all have a responsibility in the way that we lead our lives, that you know we bring these people to justice as quickly as possible. But this leads now really into my main priority, which is why I've called this meeting. That the chief constable and I, every other month, we go around to forums such as these, and we talk a bit, but more importantly, we listen, and we listen very carefully to the questions that you want to ask. I was very clear that when I became the Police and Crime Commissioner, that anyone could ask any question about anything. If it's too detailed, obviously we're not going to know the answers, but it's absolutely your right to ask these questions. And by making sure that the constabulary was open and transparent, and that was why we do have these forums. And so I hope that these will be of interest to you. And so after Nick and I have spoken, and Nikki Watson will have done a briefing, then we'll be open to questions. But first of all, a little bit about me. I wanted to run as an independent candidate for being the Police and Crime Commissioner. It became clear to me that many local people did not want to see a party politician in this role. And so, as an independent, I decided I had to put my money where my mouth was and decided to stand for the job. And luckily, enough local people, and I hope some are here, voted for me, and with 125,000 other people, that elected me to this role. I have experience of running a bakery business for 25 years, being part of a family bakery, and I've also had a real interest in the criminal justice system. I've been a magistrate for 15 years on the adult, youth and family bench. I was vice chair of the monitoring board at Bristol Prison, and I was on the police authority for the last 2 years before it was replaced by the PCC. But my role is not operational. And I make this very clear. That's not to say sometimes I wouldn't mind it being operational on occasions when I get zipped past me on the motorway at someone doing 90 miles an hour on a mobile phone, what I would give to be able to put blue lights on and go and give them a scare. However, that's not my role. But this is very much, that is the day-to-day policing and command, direction and control of all officers and all staff is the Chief Constable's, and that's quite right. But I am responsible for appointing the Chief Constable and holding him to account, setting the 5-year police and crime plan and based on local priorities, and setting the police part of the council tax precept, which stands now at over, the budget now stands at over 270 million, but is subject to another £15 million savings, which I'll talk about. But my main role is being your voice, and being your voice so that you can tell me about what's going on in your local neighbourhoods, and making sure that I can hold the chief to account and at all levels of the police, so that you can inform me, so we can make a much better police service, because it's very much a dialogue, working together, working with partners, but working with local people, so that we can continually improve our police service. But I'm only good as what you tell me. So if you don't tell me things about what's going on, then I'm the poorer for it. So, you know, I do ask you to make sure that you do engage with me and my office. And luckily, you know, there has been a number of you that have done so. If you think about it, that the police authority had about 250 people who contacted them in their last year. I mean, I had more than that in my first week, and now we're running about just over between 4,000 and 5,000 people who have now contacted my office. And I think that reflects that there's a real hunger from the public, from local people, who actually want to engage and improve their police service. The cynics amongst you will say, oh, they must be all complaints. No, they're very definitely not complaints. They are wanting to feed back about how we can do that, how we can improve the police. And that's one of the things about having one PCC as opposed to a committee of 17, is that I am much more easily identifiable and obviously much more easily contactable, so that you can make sure that your voice is heard. At the 3.5 years, at the end of my tenure, which is May 2016, you can then choose to, well, hopefully you'll then be able to choose whether what you want to do with the next Police and Crime Commissioner. I say hopefully because there was a report that came out in the Stevens report that the Labour Party are now considering whether they put into their manifesto. And if that becomes so, then I may be your one and only Police and Crime Commissioner, because I could possibly be replaced by local political leaders of Avon and Somerset. Now, obviously, I would think that that's not a great move forward, but it's whatever the elected government of the day thinks so. I think I'm particularly concerned about, we do a lot of work regionally, working with the chief constables and the police and crime commissioners in Avon and in the southwest. So replacing 5 PCCs would be 40 political leaders. I think collaboration might take a very dive into the ether and disappear altogether. But I have a broader remit than just policing. It is much more about looking at crime prevention and then looking at the criminal justice system, prison and probation. And one of the areas that I've been working on very, very much in this last year is about people with mental health issues. Sometimes there are occasions, far too many, where people who are suffering from mental health illnesses have been held in police cells because there is no facility to hold them in a safer place. And if you look at the whole of Avon, the old Avon, there is only at the moment one place of safety. So that's for over 1 million people, only one bed for those who are mentally ill. These are people who are mentally ill who have committed no crime, but there's nowhere else to put them. So therefore, when that one bed is full, police cells are used. Completely inappropriate, completely the wrong place, very damaging for the individual, and police officers are not trained to cope with such individuals. So I'm very keen. So I've been very keen working with the clinical commissioning groups and basically making sure that we can have a better service. And I'm very pleased to say that from April, a new 4-bed facility will be available, staffed by trained nurses. And that has only worked because Baines, North Somerset, Bristol and South Gloucestershire have all got together and all contributed to that 4-bed unit. So I think that's a really, really positive move. I'm also pleased to say that the money was working with partnerships, working with North Somerset, that we got some innovation bid money from the Home Office for looking at an app, a mobile app working with North Somerset, when we've been given a grant of 575,000 about looking at ways that this app will so allowing residents to access services across not only the local authority but police, so without having to go to different agencies. So what we're trying to do all the time is making sure that we are joined up, so that it's not only Amazon that can produce a very good service, but at the moment North Somerset and Avon and Somerset Constabulary can work together to produce a seamless service. And if that works well, then we will be looking at ways that we can push that across the whole of the force. But we're in a difficult position. Like with all public sector, we have cuts. There are severe cuts. The Constabulary have already made savings of 35 million, and we face another 15 million of central government cuts over the next 2 years. So one of the key decisions I have to make in February, well next week, is the police part of the council tax precept. I went out to consultation with local people and had over 5,000 people contacting me, and 75% of them agreed that they were happy to pay more. So in fact, between 2% and 10%, they were prepared to pay more. So that's an addition £3.36 a week up to £16. Okay. Now, for those of you who know, there is a referendum cap. It's called different things by which part of the government you might well sit in, but there is a referendum cap. So I don't believe I have enough mandate to go for a referendum, because that's so costly. So as of a couple of weeks ago, I was putting forward to the panel that I wanted to increase it by 1.99%. Some of you may have seen that Theresa May and Eric Pickles are now having a row, and we won't be told until next week or even the week after what that referendum cap will be, although I am told that it will be lower, but we will watch this space. So there will be an extra, I hope, £3.36p increase on a band D. And that is to offset some of the cuts that we have got. We have got 15 million in the next 2 years, but we've got some more radical cuts over the next few years. And no matter who gets into power at the next election, no one is going to come riding over the hill with an extra pot of gold saying, here you are, even in Somerset Constabulary, here's some extra money. This is business as usual, and we have to work within the money that we are given. Some of you will know that I wrote 6 police and crime plans for this year, and North Somerset having their own, and for next year there will be 9 police and crime plans which will be reflected by the district councils in Somerset. But the priorities remain unchanged. I campaigned on the priorities, I've been out to consultation on the priorities, and they will remain. That reducing the impact of antisocial behaviour in your community. There is never a residents' meeting that I go to that antisocial behaviour is not raised. Tackling domestic and sexual violence, particularly violence towards women and children. That is so vastly underreported, we need to do far more. Preventing and reducing burglary and the fear of burglary in your area, and I'm sure Nikki and Nick will talk about some real positive moves that's happened in the last year. And putting victims very much at the heart of the criminal justice system. If you look at the website, you will see that by holding the Chief Constable to account, I also make sure that the performance measures and the objectives are up on the website, and those are now available, because I want to see how, whether it's good news or whether it's bad news, the Chief Constable and I are very united as one, in as much as we want it to be your service, but so that you have access to it. So we make it open and transparent, so that you can identify and see what's going on. One of my roles is also to distribute £2.4 million grant, community safety grant, of which 75,000 went to North Somerset in this last year. And this will be increasing in this coming year to 138,000, so very nearly doubled. In the past year, I've also launched the Community Action Fund, which was £200,000, where local groups were telling me that all for a want of a small amount of money, that they had some brilliant innovative ideas. And so we have now grants available up to £5,000, which can just sort of seed prime and start a project. So if you know of any, then there's information from my team tonight, or you can access this on the website, or just give me a ring. I'm also very committed to spending at least one day a week out in the communities, listening to the people below the radar. One of the things I did yesterday, I went to Muchelney to speak to mums and toddlers who are just marooned on that island because of the flooding. And much more needs to be done, and the hassle that they have to go through just trying to lead daily lives is very concerning. But I spent in North Somerset. I went out early part of this year and finding out more about the Weston-super-Mare chaplaincy About Town project, and then hosted a public drop-in session at the Healthy Living Centre where I talked to residents. I later visited the Lighthouse project funded by the Action Fund, which do a remarkable job of supporting those in need of a time of crisis, providing a safe space. So those are the things that we can do that is slightly different to what the Constable are doing, but making sure that residents are really involved in making our communities safer and stronger. And from next year, I'll be responsible for commissioning local victim support services, making sure that I want to improve victim satisfaction and the service that victims receive. There are too many different organisations that can ask victims too many times about their crime. And what we need to do, and every time that victim has to talk about their crime to another individual, we are asking them to relive that crime. And if the average is 35 times, which I am told, what we put that victim through is not acceptable. So we're now working with an integrated victims board, getting everyone who is involved with victims all together at the table about how we can improve the service. One of the other issues that I want to talk about is making sure that there are far more ways that local residents can get involved, either with Neighbourhood Watch, Community Speed Watch, Farm Watch, so that we can make that stronger and make sure that residents, because with a smaller workforce, which is what is going to happen, we must make sure that we listen to our residents very, very clearly and give them the information back. You're not just going to give us information if it's just pouring communication into a dark hole. It's very important that we value what residents are telling us, and I think much more needs to be done on that. I've also got I've got an independent residents panel which looks at police complaints, because obviously integrity of the police is a really important part. You only have to open the national papers at any time at the moment to look at that. But I'm very happy to say that locally the confidence in the police is increasing, and this is the third quarter has increased to nearly 75%. So that's a very brief canter of what I'm doing, and as you can see, it's been a very busy year. There are a lot of exciting challenges coming up over in the next 2 years, but always remember that I'm your Police and Crime Commissioner, so please use me. So Nick, if I can ask you to give an outline. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be very brief because there's so much overlap between what Sue says and the things that preoccupy me from day to day. But I'm in a position now where I'm approaching my first anniversary as chief. I'm just seeing off the last few things that I'm doing for the first time, and in a few weeks' time I'll start doing things for the second time, including the swearing in of the Somerset High Sheriff in Wells. The kind of day-to-day stuff that's top of my agenda, there are 4 things I just thought I'd mention briefly. Day-to-day stuff that's top of my agenda is just the kind of operational demands of running a large police force. And we've seen this week, Sue's made reference to the flooding incidents. A few weeks ago we had to deal with quite a lot of political interest on the subject of the badger cull. From time to time we have serious incidents. The organisation is holding its breath in anticipation of the Independent Police Complaints Commission report following the murder of Bijan Ibrahimi in Bristol in July. And so they're the kind of things that happen in large police forces. Of course, I'm expecting bad news from the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and I don't think you should just accept that bad things happen. You certainly shouldn't just accept that bad policing happens. But the kind of day-to-day rhythm of the constabulary is just dealing with those bad things that happen in our society. By and large, we deal with them, I think, pretty well. When I've been here before, I've talked about the good track record and tradition of the constabulary over recent times. Crime has continued to fall over a sustained period of time, and as Sue's pointed out, more recently confidence has begun to increase. So, that's not a bad place to start. That said, I'm anxious that there are certain types of criminality that are falling, without doubt. Fewer people are having their homes broken into, fewer people are having their cars stolen, fewer people are having their cars broken into, etc., etc. But there are other types of criminality where I'm not sure that it's our recording practice that's the problem. That's not to say that I believe police crime reporting to be corrupt, because I absolutely don't. I think it's the cleanest it has ever been. But some types of criminality are actually very difficult. We've not caught up with a changing world yet. We've not caught up with cybercrime. We've not caught up with online crime. We've not caught up with cyberbullying. We've not caught up with child sexual exploitation or female genital mutilation, or indeed, with domestic abuse and some serious sexual offences. We aren't where we want to be in terms of getting people to record and report offences to us. So there's a long way to go, but nevertheless, I think we can say with confidence crime is falling, and I think confidence in the police increasing. And that balance of kind of the operational day-to-day rhythm and heartbeat of the police force is my first preoccupation. Secondly is the challenge of money, and Sue's talked about the numbers there. The point, what that translates to for me, is a shrinking organisation. There was a time a few years ago when we were an organisation, we were a £300 million a year budget organisation. Well, this year we're a £275 million organisation. Time was, very recently, we had 3,350 plus officers. At the moment, we've got about 2,850. We'll announce some changes tomorrow to our operating model to cope with the next wave of cuts, and that's going to take the force below 2,800 police officers for the first time in several years. And that is, of course, a concern to me. It's not for the chief of any police force to lobby for additional funding, but it is my job to point out when there will be operational consequences of reductions in funding. The third thing, beyond performance and finance, is just modernisation and just organisational change. It would be a pretty poor chief who just felt sorry for themselves when they saw the budget shrinking and saw times changing. I don't think that's acceptable. I think what we have to do is get on and modernise the organisation and develop the organisation and ensure that we adapt as well as we possibly can to a changing environment. And tomorrow we'll make some big announcements about how we're going to change the way we operate, change the service delivery model for Avon and Somerset Constabulary. And having bludgeoned a load of local reporters into submission this afternoon and forced them to accept a press embargo on what we've just told them, it would be foolhardy and irresponsible of me to go into that in any depth now. Safe to say that we've worked out how we're going to move into big new police stations. We're opening a 36-cell complex at Bridgewater. We're opening a 48-cell complex at Patchway and another 48-cell complex at Keynsham. And we'll be closing down a lot of other custody offices. We'll be taking on delivery of big new IT systems for crime, intelligence, case preparation and custody, all in the course of 2014. So it's a year of considerable change for the constabulary, and my job is to make sure that that organisational change is delivered in circumstances that have the least impact on frontline performance and indeed on frontline morale. And then the final area that preoccupies me is that question of our people. On the one hand, we need to change. The people, people tell me that, you know, they think the police are great and, you know, we're good people, but, you know, we're a little bit inward-looking, introspective, a little bit defensive, a little bit closed. And when our people talk to members of the community, by and large they're great, but sometimes they lapse into this sort of policey jargon and we don't quite understand. And the culture of policing just needs to modernise and move on, and we collectively need to change, and I share that view. And when I talk internally in the organisation, I say to colleagues, you know, we need to change, but that doesn't mean you don't do a good job. You know, there are great people in policing. You know, we have the pick of our candidates. When we advertised for police constable vacancies back in May, we opened up our web portal for 4 days. We were looking to fill about 150 vacancies. We had 4,000 applicants. We rejected about 96% of those applicants. So we have the pick of a very strong field of candidates. Really good people join us, and then we ask them to do a really hard job. And you know, some of my job's easy. My job's interesting, varied, stimulating, and I wouldn't swap it for the world. But actually, I feel for the people who are working response shifts. They've been doing it year in, year out on dark, damp, unappealing evenings like this, where they're going to the same addresses time after time, they're seeing the same people week after week, people who aren't necessarily always the easiest to help, nor indeed the most polite, nor indeed the most grateful. And it's my job, in terms of the culture of the organisation, to move it on, to modernise it, but to do it in a way that is respectful to the people who are delivering policing, because they are very good people. And I'm pleased that we've got colleagues in the room this evening who are here to answer all the hard questions that you may have about local policing. And so that's the kind of cultural challenge that we face. And your help in doing that is very important to us. Final thing I'll say is just what I say to our officers, which is to set our collective expectation of policing. I say to officers that first and foremost, you absolutely must, we as a police service absolutely must be people of integrity. You know, I remember David O'Dowd, the Inspector of Constabulary, back in 1999, former Chief Constable of Northamptonshire, wrote a report on police integrity. And he began with the sentence, I may get a word or two wrong here, but basically, there can be no more basic requirement of a member of a police service than that they are honest and act with integrity. And that has to be first and foremost. If you can't believe the police, then we're all in a very bad place. And so that sometimes means, you know, telling the truth in difficult circumstances, when it's, you know, acting with moral courage when it's easier not to. The second thing I say is we've also all just got to work hard. You know, one of the complaints, indeed one of the most common complaints we get about policing, is that the officers are lazy. You know, they just don't do their job. And actually, in the circumstances I've just described, where you're going to the same addresses, to the same people, it's easy to lose your appetite and your zest and your sense of mission for policing. And it's the job of the leaders of the service to make sure that that doesn't happen. And colleagues do need to work hard, live the values of our police force, which are all about doing today's work today, being professional, friendly and interested, etc. And then finally, I talk to colleagues about treating people fairly and with respect, whoever they are, whatever their background, whether they're the road sweeper or the Lord Lieutenant or absolutely anybody, or a person sleeping rough in a shop doorway. You know, we should treat them fairly and with respect, and to speak to them in a language that they understand and not in some sort of police jargon. And I say to colleagues, if you do those three things, you act with integrity, you work hard and you treat people fairly and with respect, then you're unlikely to go far wrong with me. And I mention that to you because I encourage you to say the same to the police, and, you know, and to gauge them and assess them by those standards of behaviour. And when they meet or exceed those standards, I'm delighted to hear about it, and I'm delighted to hear people say kind things about the service they've received from police officers, PCSOs and others. But when we don't meet that standard, then, you know, we need to hear about it because we need to put it right. I'll stop there and hand over to Nikki, because Nikki can give you a clearer picture of what's actually happening in the area. Just by way of introduction, back in May when we made our first set of changes, we asked Nikki to go from being the commander just for the eastern part of Somerset. We gave her the western half of Somerset and North Somerset too. She hasn't half worn out some tyres on her car in the intervening period, but I'm very pleased and appreciative of the way in which she's risen to that challenge and has been a very effective commander on our behalf in the area, and we've got a huge amount of confidence in Nikki and in the work she does, and she'll present to you now, and then afterwards the three of us will be available to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. And the first slide. Right. Hopefully you can see that. Although I am the commander for Somerset, as Nick said, I'm going to concentrate tonight on North Somerset because I'm guessing that's the area that you're going to be interested in. So our local policing area of North Somerset completely mirrors the boundary of North Somerset Council. And as this slide shows, we have 4 police stations within North Somerset. And although that's where we base our police officers, our PCSOs and our police staff, those staff police the whole of the area. They go to those stations to brief and pick up their equipment, and then they're out on patrol covering the whole of the North Somerset area. I guess it would be quite pertinent to say, actually, because I'm trying to anticipate some of the questions that may come later, that the places where our bases are, although our buildings may change over the future years, we do not intend to withdraw from any of those communities. We will always have a base in those communities. It may not be the exact same building that we're currently in, but we're not going to move out of those communities. We'll keep our bases there. Okay. There's a really positive story to tell for North Somerset. Just looking at this slide, crime has reduced by 30% in the last 5 years. That's 4,000 fewer victims. Significant reduction in crime, and we've seen that crime across more or less every single crime category. That's a really, really positive story. If we can stop crime happening, that is the ultimate. But crime does happen, unfortunately, and bringing offenders to justice, we solve 1/3 of all crime in the last year, and 5 years ago we were only solving 1/4 of crime. So we're bringing more offenders to justice. But what's very, very important is that that we deal with our victims with care, and that we try and address their expectations and what they need from us. So customer satisfaction is very, very important to us. And at the moment, our victims are satisfied about 80% of the time for crime, and for antisocial behaviour it's just less than 80%. That's not to say that we can't improve, and that's something that we work on day in, day out. But those are our figures at the moment. But clearly, we are an organisation where continuous improvement is really important to us. So we like to listen to our public, listen to our victims, and we are always striving to do better. The next slide is just one example of that. I think probably both Sue and Nick have mentioned domestic abuse already. This slide illustrates the destructive nature of this horrible, horrible crime. And in actual fact, I talked earlier about reducing crime. This is one area where Sue has asked us to increase the confidence of victims so that they can feel confident to come forward and report this type of crime. So we actually have an ambition to increase the number of crimes in this category because we're fearful that it's being underreported currently. It's an area of partnership working. It's not something that we can deal with on our own. We need to work with communities, we need to work with victims, and we need to work with other partners to make sure that we deal with the crime and that we give the proper support to the victims and the wider people who are affected by this crime. I wanted just to give some other examples of partnership working because there's so much that we can't do on our own, and we are reliant on working with communities, with other agencies and community groups to make our communities safer. So on this slide it gives you a number of examples of where we're working with communities and other partners. The first bullet on the slide was where a lot of benches in the Bonville area were being broken, destroyed, moved, and we've worked with young people in the area who've decorated and repaired the benches and helped with new locations. So they've got some ownership of those benches, and the problem has more or less gone away. The second is a similar example of where we've worked with young people, from students from Weston College, to paint and do up an alleyway in the town. we work with communities on allotment watch. In the Bourneville area, a lot of allotments were receiving thefts from sheds and damage. And the community team work very much with the allotment owners. We have a watch set up, and that's dramatically reduced the problems in those areas. Safe Places is a scheme which helps people if they're out. It's generally in our town centres. If they start feeling vulnerable, afraid, confused, they can go into a shop which is displaying the Safe Places sticker, and we've given some training to the members of staff in those shops to help that person, support that person, and deal with the issue that they're worried about. We heard very recently we applied for some money from the government. We applied in partnership with the council in Weston to produce an app which people can access both ours and the council's website from mobile devices, try and make us more accessible, make our information more accessible to communities. And many of you will know about the Gateway project here in the town hall, which is our front office, our gateway into our organisation, as well as the council organisation, working very, very closely together. Antisocial behaviour and the nighttime economy. Weston is a thriving town. It's a place where people like to go out, and in most occasions people can come out, have an enjoyable evening, and take part in the nightlife in Weston. On occasions there will be problems and issues, and we work very closely with the licensing authority, with the licensees, and with organisations within Weston to reduce any of those problems that might happen. So the traffic light system is something that we've just started in the last 3 or 4 weeks, where we basically give a red, amber or green to a licensed premise, and there's a number of steps to getting a green light. So we're working closely, and that is something that licensees can work towards. The pub watch is thriving in Weston. It's a very positive initiative, partnership working, and we're taking some of the good examples of practice in the Newquay area, where we have a web-based system. So people that are banned from some of the licensed premises go on this web-based system. So the door staff on mobile phones can have a look whilst they're out on the door and check if somebody's banned or not. So we're taking good practice from other areas, using technology to give the best service that we can and make sure that people are up to date with all the information that they need to be. The bottom bullet point on the slide about the purple flag, for those of you who are not aware, purple flag is almost equivalent to a blue flag for beach. A purple flag is for a vibrant nighttime economy. And we've worked with other partners in the council and other groups to decide we're going to aim towards applying for purple flag for Weston. We need to put some measures in place before we're ready to apply, but that is our aspiration, so that we can get a purple flag for Weston Town. I thought I'd just mention road traffic issues. A lot of people talk to Sue and raise their concerns about speeding, about road traffic issues, and so it was right that I mentioned it tonight. We do listen very, very closely to the problems that a community is having, and certainly any obstruction issues like that we will come and deal with. Speed watch, we can't be everywhere all the time dealing with speeders, but community speed watch is a proven, really positive way of reducing speeding in an area. And we have a number of really vibrant schemes. So speed watch schemes are currently in Weston, Nailsea, Burrington, Tickenham, Portishead, Rington, Weston Gordano and Fayland. Members of the community are prepared to go out with a speed gun with some training, take the registration numbers of vehicles, which we then send a letter to the drivers. And we have a fairly sophisticated system, so that if a vehicle number comes up a number of times, then a uniform officer or PCC will actually go around and visit that driver to give them some more stern words of advice rather than just receiving a letter. And it really does reduce speeding in the areas where it's set up. So if you haven't got one in your area, I would really encourage you to start one. Please come and speak to any of our officers and we will assist with that. There were some specific antisocial behaviour related vehicles with vehicles in the Porter's Head area along the seafront, and we've worked with partners to do some designing out with speed bumps and gating off some of the car parks that didn't need to be used in the evening. But we've also increased the number of visible patrols in the area. We've had some days of action and work with our partners in the operations department to really reduce the problems that were happening there. So my final slide, I just wanted to talk about the Bourneville area. There's a lot of fantastic work going on in Bourneville with a lot of really committed workers, not just from the police, but from the council, from lots of the other partner agencies in the Western area. It is a busy area and there is a lot happening in the Bourneville. But the Bourneville project, what we're hoping to do is work with partners and communities to coordinate our efforts to get the best results. So we're hoping that we can, by coordinating what we do, reduce crime, antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, youth crime, and improve the community's trust and confidence in the police and other agencies, that we're working together to get the best outcome for the area. We will clearly tie in very closely to the High Impact Families project, because there may be a number of families living within that area, so we will need to coordinate that work. And I'm really pleased to announce that we've just recruited a fantastic sergeant to lead that piece of work, Lee Kerslake, who comes with a huge amount of experience, partnership working. And he will be joining us very, very shortly to work on that project. So I am going to close there to give you time to ask us lots of interesting questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm particularly excited about Bourneville, having seen it work in the Hulken down at Taunton. I think it's really positive and it's produced some phenomenal results. And just by getting organisations sitting around the table talking about the individuals and working out how to problem solve, how to actually, preempt crimes, looking after vulnerable victims, having seen it in action, it is a very powerful way of working, so good luck. Right, now it's over to you. So, Toby, gentleman here.
Oh, one little one. Hello. Nikki, just a point. Winscombe and Sanford have got a speed watch. It's the longest serving speed watch, being 11 years old. I set it up when I was a local action team coordinator for North Somerset. But that's just in passing.
Fantastic.
The first question, I've got 4 questions, but I'm not going to ask them all now, just the first one. We are concerned in, let me put this in context, disregard towns. I'm talking about villages, okay? Villages, community policing in villages, okay? Now, I understand there's a possible change to the police constables and PCSO shift patterns. The present shift pattern works extremely well and has been for some time in communities, because it means that the officers or the PCSOs can be present at regular surgeries at specific times during the week. They can also attend parish council meetings, they can attend PACT meetings, and they can attend other agency meetings, because it means that one of them is on one of the shifts during each day. So there's always one or other of the beat team available for people to contact. Now, I understand with the new shift pattern that is proposed that there will be a problem with them, attending all these meetings, because they might well be both off at the same time, and also that a number of PCSOs I know have sat down and worked out that it's going to affect their allowances, i.e. it's going to increase their allowances, as they've worked it out, by something, and this is just for North Somerset, by something in excess of £100,000. So, Nick, I ask for your comments.
Okay. We are making change. I'm just reminded, actually, I was talking about how having bludgeoned the press into submission earlier on my embargo about what we're announcing tomorrow. I've just seen that one of them's here, so I'm going to be doubly careful. But What we are doing is reducing the extent of silo working in policing, where you've got a team that where the beat people, and where the response people, and where the intelligence people, and where the investigative support people, and where the proactive team, and they come to work, and they, may or may not even be aware of what each other's doing, and then they won't see each other from day to day. We're trialling this in the northeastern area of the force, and there's an inspector who's got used to briefing about 10 to 12 people every day for the last few years. And he's trialling this new way of working. He turned up for work the other day and combined the people in front of him in the room and those that were beaming in from other stations for his briefing. He nearly knocked off his chair when he saw there were 42 people he was briefing. And that's just by pulling the whole police family together and saying we're actually going to work in a more integrated way. And that's the philosophy behind this. You start looking as somebody running policing operations and think, oh wow, there's a bit of resource here. I can actually do some damage with this. Damage probably not being the most opportune choice of words. The second thing is about aligning people with demand rather than just with the work of parish councils and partners. Because actually our demand follows a particular pattern where it's low in the morning, has a breakfast time peak, goes down mid-morning, builds to a kind of school kicking out peak, dips again in the early evening, and then has its real peak of the day, sort of around 9 p.m, which particularly the weekends is then sustained to up towards 11, and then starts to drop to a very low level in the middle of the night. But unfortunately, too many of our people are on when the demand isn't high, and insufficient people are on duty when the demand is high. And there is an attempt to make people work later. And if that means paying people a bit more in shift allowance, I would dispute the figure of £100,000 hotly. But if that means paying people a little... I'm sure that there are plenty of people on our staff who aren't relishing the prospect of missing EastEnders as often as I'm going to be suggesting they do. And they may well brief against that. And I'm prepared to take a little criticism on that, and let's see how we go. But it's about aligning people to demand and having the service working as a single team. And frankly, if I hear the horror story that a beat officer has been unable to attend a parish council meeting because they've been arresting a burglar, well, that's actually not bad news from my perspective. We are the police, and we're there to lock up thieves and to keep you safe. If you have a beat officer who hasn't been to a parish council meeting in the last 3 years because they've effectively become a de facto response officer, then that's a very different proposition, and I want to hear about it because we will safeguard neighbourhood policing. These officers won't be working the night shifts. They'll shadow the response shifts, but they won't be doing the night shifts. There will, of course, be the flexibility in ordinary circumstances to change a shift to fit in a meeting where it's desirable to attend the meeting. And there will be, whilst there'll be reductions in other categories of officers, there will be no reductions in beat officers, and there'll be no reductions in the number of PCSOs working in neighbourhood policing. And that's evidence of a commitment to make sure that neighbourhood policing continues to work.
Thank you.
I'm David Cordingley. I live in the town centre on the borders of Central Ward, that's where this town hall is, and West Ward. I'm a member of the Town Centre Pact. Now, we learned from the Pact that West Ward and Central Ward have a disproportionately high crime rate compared to Western and actually North Somerset. And I wanted to ask you, please, Sue, if you wouldn't mind building into your strategy an investigation of what those high crime areas are, like you've done with Bourneville, what those high crime areas are in Avon and Somerset, and report back statistically how you are getting those high crime areas, like these two wards, back down at least to the norm. At least we know where they are and what you're doing about these special areas, programs like you're doing in Bourneville, for example.
Thank you. I will go to Nikki in a minute, but I need to just explain to you that I am not operational. I hold the Chief Constable to account, and it is for him and his officers to work out where the resources have to go. I will ask questions and I will dig very deep into making sure that I get the right answers. But as far as working out, where his officers and where the PCSOs go to, that is not my role. I don't have that experience. But Nikki, if you could just go into some of the detail there.
So we have a system whereby we, every morning, look at the crime that's happened overnight. So we look at it on a daily basis, but we also look at longer term trends. If we have an area which is a higher crime area, then we look at and do the analysis and problem solve what is that crime, how can we reduce it, how can we work with other partners to reduce it. If you're not getting the information around your packed area on that analysis and the breakdown of the type of crime and what can be done to reduce it, then I'll make sure it comes to your next meeting.
What I was asking for, if it's possible to build a strategy so that you can identify for all of us in the Avon and Somerset area, which are the high crime areas, and then build a strategy to reduce all of them.
Yes, and that is our job. It's the function of our headquarters intelligence function. Those people, and indeed our strategic development people, just to sit back and understand what's going on. Where are the high crime areas? From time to time, we need to rerun the resource allocation model because some areas will go up and come down. There will always be a tension between built-up areas and rural areas, where if you solely deployed against numbers of crime and density of crimes, we would be policing Bristol to a greater extent, and the urban areas, and some rural areas where you kind of frequently don't see a crime from one month to the next, you wouldn't deploy that. But then you happen, as we had overnight on Saturday into Sunday last weekend, and the Wednesday into Thursday last weekend, suddenly an area like Rington gets hit, a load of sheds broken into, and actually there's no policing there to respond to it. So there will always be a balance between high crime and high density and lower crime, but areas that need a residual degree of policing anyway. The challenge that I face is that across all of those areas, the amount of policing available is, in absolute terms, reducing. I've described the numbers of police force. Police staff reductions are comparable. As the budget tumbles, there will be fewer and fewer of us. And so, yes, in answer to your question, do we produce an analysis of where the problems are, and is each and every beat team accountable for doing something about bringing crime down? Then yes, that's their job, and that's my job. And if you look at the crime figures in this force area, where 180,000 offences were being reported each year back in 2005, and 90-odd thousand offences were reported last year, we've manifestly, working with other partners, been very successful in that regard. There's still more that can be done, and yes, we'll continue to do it. And if you'd like local commanders to share that analysis with you, what type of criminality is it, what might be done about it, what prevention might be effective, what investigative strategies are being pursued, I think that's just what good policing's about. Yes.
Thank you. This gentleman on the right here.
Thank you very much. My name is Pat Sessions. I'm here on behalf of my mother, who's the coordinator of the Old Mixon Hillside Neighbourhood Watch Scheme, which has been in Weston for over 20 years now. I saw in your police and crime plan that you have objectives to support the expansion of Neighbourhood Watch and through development of volunteer opportunities, and you touched on this earlier. However, when the entire beat team is off duty at the same time and don't return calls, what real support has been given to Neighbourhood Watch in the last year, and what are your plans to do so?
Okay, I'll answer the bit about Neighbourhood Watch. Let me be very clear. I'm working with senior officers now to make sure that that resources are being put to support Neighbourhood Watch, Community Speed Watch, and in fact all the watches, to make sure that conversation is going on. And you now get every 7 days, I think, an update of the local crimes in your area. And if you're not getting that, please contact one of my team, and we'll make sure that you go on that website, because there is a real impetus now having heard some terrible stories from some neighbourhood watch. The problem is that some neighbourhood watches are really effective and efficient, and some are not. Therefore, what we've got to do is, what the police have got to do, is be far more consistent with how they are supporting neighbourhood watches, and that is being rolled out, and I think there is far more emphasis on that. But I mean, one of the questions that you mentioned as far as not being able to contact the police, so needless to say, I'm going to give that to Nikki.
So with Neighbourhood Watch, clearly we've supported Neighbourhood Watch for a number of years, and we haven't always given the as good a service as perhaps we should have done. And one of the things that will certainly help us to improve in the future is our new website, which goes live later this week. It's going to be introduced in three different stages, and at the final stage, which should be around June time, we will replace Ringmaster, which is, for those of you not in Neighbourhood Watch, Ringmaster is a system of communication with our neighbourhood watches. It's very one way, actually. All we do is we put information on there, and there's no mechanism to receive feedback. But our new website will replace that. So not only will we be able to, in a much easier way, put information on there, which is more relevant and specific to more local areas, but there will be the mechanism for neighbourhood watch schemes to feed back to us. So if we put on, there's a suspicious vehicle with this number, neighbourhood watches will be easily able to get back to say, yes, we've seen it, it's gone down that road. So that, and you can't put everything on technology, but that's certainly going to help with the communication. It will make it easier for us. It will certainly make it much, much easier for members of watch schemes. But we have, as Sue mentioned, she has shined the light on Neighbourhood Watch, and we are reviewing our support to Neighbourhood Watch, and I've certainly given it as a priority to all of my neighbourhood staff that they need to be keeping regular contact with Neighbourhood Watches, and it's a priority for us, because actually we can't be everywhere all the time, and Neighbourhood Watch is a fantastic way of working with the community to have eyes and ears in places where we're not at certain times of the day. So it's certainly a focus for us, and I'm hoping that you'll start to get a better service.
I think that one of the problems with Neighbourhood Watch is that a wee while ago we bought some, a long time before my arrival, we bought some software in expectation that it was going to revolutionise support to Neighbourhood Watch and take out the need for human intervention. What several commanders did was dispense with the human intervention before the software was up and running properly, which is of course a recipe for unhappiness, and the service fell away in certain areas. Another one of the things that I was saying to the press today that's embargoed until tomorrow is that one of the characteristics of working in austerity is that there needs to be a stronger central grip in a police organisation, and frankly there'll be a little bit less local room for manoeuvre in decision making, and there will be no room for manoeuvre about Neighbourhood Watch. You know, it'll be a basic requirement of local policing that we support Neighbourhood Watch, and that comes as a direct consequence of every one of these fora that Sue and I have been in. We've been told about the patchy mixed picture that is Neighbourhood Watch. So there'll be a much stronger corporate grip on standards on Neighbourhood Watch, as there will be on offender management, as there will be on rape and sexual assault investigation. There'll be a corporate model, and local commanders are just going to have to go along with it and not reinvent it.
Thank you. Is Lady down there? Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Jackie Bush and I'm Chair of Churchill Parish Council. During our January meeting, the councillors were told, and indeed the residents, that when PC Bradley retires in October, he will not be replaced, but his beat will be split and given to the two neighbouring beats. We all really felt that this would mean that our police in our area was going to be watered down for the second time, as this is what happened when PC Jackie MacDonald retired a couple of years ago, and half of her beat came over to Ray's. As you know, that Ray is an extremely dedicated and proactive officer who probably would be impossible for you to replace. But we're extremely concerned that whoever does take up that mantle in the other two beats, crime will rise in our rural areas without such a proactive officer in place. And we do have a speed watch in Churchill.
I'm happy to answer that question. I think, because I've spoken to Ray about this, and I think what he was trying to give to the meeting were some options that might happen, because actually no decisions have been made. As Nick has already said, we're not intending on reducing the number of beat managers or PCSOs, and let's hope we might be able to increase them, but we don't know yet. And there is certainly no plan to split the beats and give it to other people. There is a plan to give the best service that we can for all of our areas. So Ray wasn't deliberately trying to be misleading. I think he was trying to look at what might happen, but actually that's not going to happen.
I would like to agree that having met Ray on a number of occasions, he is totally irreplaceable, and he will be very sadly missed. Lady in the front here.
Thank you very much. My name's Rhiannon Prisoin, and I've got a couple of hats on actually, but I wanted to pick up the internet safety issue. And I work with Liberal Network, which is supporting activities for children and young people. And our children, most of them have never known a time when they haven't been able to use the internet, and it's a marvellous resource, but it's also can put children, as we know, at risk of sexual exploitation and at risk of cyberbullying, with the consequences of that. I'm also part of a community project supporting older people who aren't familiar with the internet but are constantly having to engage with it, and they're afraid of it. So how do we, and they're both safeguarding issues actually, how does the police, I know you were saying that we need to work on this, but how are we going to raise awareness in our communities? Because it's almost a hidden crime. And how do we support our communities to become internet savvy, internet safe, for our children and our older people as well?
I think it's a very valid question. It's slightly different to the point I was making, but obviously related. The internet is a public place, but it's a new type of public place, and the younger generation are typically somewhat blasé about the risks in that public place, and the older generation, I know from endless hours of coaching with my mum on her internet, her frankly faltering and perennially unsuccessful career on the internet, that she finds it daunting and intimidating. And then there's the second issue, that it's a place where crime happens. And my point earlier was that it's a place where crime happens, and yet our recording practice hasn't yet caught up. And it's also much more difficult for relatively small geographical police forces to make sense of this World Wide Web, where your offender could be in the house next door, but actually, they could be in Ethiopia, they could be in Poland, they could be in California. And there's a long way to go on that. In terms of the safety, I think we're getting better quickly around safety. I was at a special school in the area just recently, a couple of Fridays ago, handing out internet safety certificates to young people who'd been through a program, because I forget exactly the date, but I think Internet Safety Day is the 15th of February, or it's certainly coming up very soon. And I think that there are lots and lots of good products out there. We should be encouraging schools to make the most of them, and I think this police service does have a role to play in that, without turning our already omnicompetent officers into expecting them to have another specialism. But I think we can do something on that. In terms of older people, I think that internet safety and kind of vulnerability to fraud is again something that more could be done on. I would look to the City of London Police, who have a kind of national responsibility for fraud, for policing, to do more in this regard, and prompted by you. I just need to find out exactly what they're doing so far. But I think the general picture is one where there is actually quite a lot of resource out there. There could do to be more. the service, as I indicated earlier, is running to catch up in this area. And when you're running to catch up, it's not a good time to be running to catch up when you're in an era of shrinking resources, because most of our time spent discussing what we're going to do less of, not what we're going to do more of. But we kind of reach an in-principle position that there are some things we know we're going to need to find extra resource for. We're just in the process of working out how.
I think there's a lot of work in schools.
Yeah.
But there's also the water sector.
Yeah.
We're actually out of the communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
As an office, I'm already working with schools and various organisations on making sure that that message does get out, particularly to young people who can be quite blasé about their privacy, things like sexting, making themselves at risk, and also making sure that if they do press the send button and that information goes out, about what to do when that information has gone out, and not to keep it inward, because I think that cyberbullying is something that puts a lot of our young people at great risk, and working with the voluntary sector, there is a much stronger message. As far as the older people, I have my mum's 81, and she constantly reminds me that there are so many organisations that almost disenfranchise the older community by saying, well, it's on the website. And I'm very conscious of the things that I've been saying is that it's on the website. But of course, for some people who don't want to, or it's too frightening to go on the internet, we must always make sure that there are opportunities face-to-face, on the telephone, hard copies that are always available, and I am constantly reminded that that will be the case. But of course, more that can be done on the internet. Just make sure that the officers and PCSOs then have more time to spend with people who can't access the internet. Gentleman, yes, in the red tie. Okay.
Thanks. I'm Councillor Ian Parker. I represent Weston South Ward, which of course includes the Bourneville Estate. And I'm interested in talking to you tonight about the Bourneville 1 project. I'm quite happy to support this project, but at the same time, it does give me some concern when we realise, for those of us that know all about these things, that recently there's been a proliferation of CCTV cameras on the Bourneville. They're now about to get their resident police force, and it sends out a message to the outside world that the Bourneville is, or must be, a bad place to live. But I know full well, of course, that it isn't. And people are afraid to go down there. They say to me, I wouldn't go down to the Bourneville if you paid me. What I would like to know, if you're able to tell me today, and it might be a question you can't answer in full detail, is what is it about your crime statistics that makes it the 5th busiest place in the constabulary? What are the nature of the incidents that are occurring on the Bourneville? And given that when your officers are in place, they're going to be quite busy combating this crime, I would imagine, what time are they going to then have to take care of the more social aspects of your program, such as linking in with high-impact families and things like that? And thirdly, when this new sergeant is in place, I would like the opportunity to meet with him, please.
Well, the strength of this piece of work is that it's not the police doing it all on our own. The strength is the partnership working. So we're working with the housing agencies, we're working with the council, we're working with community groups, we're working with members of the community, we're working with the High Impact Family Project. So it's a real collaborative effort to deal with all the issues, not just crime and antisocial behaviour, but the much wider social issues. So you can't deal with any of those one thing on its own, because otherwise you don't get the outcome that you're seeking. So it's not about putting a black dot on an area. It's about working together to improve the trust and confidence that people have, and to make sure that people can go about their lives free from crime, but also that the area can improve economically, socially, and in many other ways. The way that we measure the crime levels is we measure it per thousand population. It's the standard way of measuring crime levels. So that's how it will be measured. And there's no one crime that particularly stands out. It will be across the whole range of different crimes and antisocial behaviour. But it's not just about high crime, it's about knowing that there's something that can be done, that agencies can work together. It's very likely that there are a number of agencies working with a number of families, and our activity won't be coordinated, which is dreadful for the family, because they just get a whole stream of professionals coming through their door. It's not joined up for them in the slightest, and it's not getting the outcomes for that family, and it's not good, efficient use of our resources. So we need to work closer together to get better outcomes. And it's very, very much partnership working.
Thank you. Was there someone at the back that I... Yes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Serena. I'm a HE student at Weston College. So I've recently moved into the area, and I was just wondering what other communication strategies you've got to encourage and involve other young people to voice their opinions and their issues towards police, and if not, what strategies do you plan on putting in place?
Communication strategies, I think, for young people.
Right. Okay. I think you were saying about communication strategy with young people. Yeah. Okay. We go out as the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. We spend a lot of time going out to colleges and working very closely, because it's a bit like with victims. You know, it's all very well for people like me who were young once, but obviously a very long time ago. And working out what they want from their police service. And we have worked very much with young people so that they tell us. And in fact, we had a group together a couple of weeks ago of young people across the whole of Avon and Somerset, and it was a very consistent message that they wanted confidentiality when they reported a crime, because they were concerned that they would be seen to be grassing up their mates, and that they also wanted to have much more contact with police officers and PCSOs coming into their youth clubs, coming into their colleges, and I think that is an area that we will be building on. But it is very clear to me, I mean, you know, young people are more likely to be victims of crime than any other age group. And when you talk to most people, they will say young people are invariably the perpetrators of crime. But that is not the case. They are very vulnerable. And we are working very closely with local authorities and organisations about making sure that there are different places for young people to go. Certainly when I was young, I would go to a youth club or something similar because I wanted to be with my mates or whatever. Now, the number of people who tell me in youth clubs all over Avon and Somerset that they go there to feel safe. Now that is a sad indictment of the feeling that they have in their communities. So we do have to work much more closely with them, and that's one of the areas I'm working with the Community Safety Grant in making sure that there is an allocated money that supports such organisations working with those young people.
And from an operational perspective, I support everything that Sue tries to do. I think the police service just needs to put itself where young people are, and that means having a presence in schools and colleges. And there are some very good schools and colleges. Gargan is a very good example that actually pays to have a police presence on its grounds all the time. I think that's very useful. The other place where young people are is online, and so we've been dramatically increasing the number of police people who are tweeting and using other social media. And we see a better interaction as a consequence of that. And also it's part of the neighbourhood policing strategy, just get out there and approach young people from a perspective not of, we're coming to police you on behalf of old people. We're actually going to be even-handed and fair and listen, and when young people say, what exactly am I doing wrong, officer, or where exactly would you like me to go, officers actually work thoughtfully through those challenges rather than just taking sides in an arbitrary and unfair way.
Thank you.
They pay for a police community support officer, yes.
Is that like part of the constabulary, or is that private, like security?
No. Sorry, the question for people who can't hear at the back is, I just said that Gordano School pays to support this. What they pay is for a police community support officer who's dedicated to the school and employed by us, by me, trained by us, equipped by us, work to us, but are permanently deployed within the school. And Sue and I, on one of our days, we regularly spend a day out with officers in our policing areas, and we went to visit the school to see how that worked. It's an extremely impressive setup. The school feels that actually, compared to other ways it might spend that money, it gets real value for what it spends, and we agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, the only reason I asked the question is because not the sort of else of things that might people like root for the pattern.
No, this is not that. This is a PCSO. Thank you. Gentleman in front of me, yeah.
Thank you. My name's Charles Cave, ward member for Wrexhall, Fayland and Long Ashton, affectionately known as the Frozen North. I can add to your speed watch list. We have one in Long Ashton, so you're doing quite well this evening. We've probably been going for so long, at least as long as Steve Bridges, that we've fallen off the radar. My question is with regard to communication, and I know you've touched on that, but perhaps I've got a slightly different slant on it. With budget pressures and ever larger beats, there is, in my experience, less everyday communication between the police and the community. Would you agree with me that given the current pressures, communication is more important than ever in order that good working relationships can be built, resulting in the community being more able to help themselves and support their beat and community officers? I believe that we need to encourage regular contact between the beat officers and leaders of the community, which would be complementary to PAC, local action team or parish or town council contact. Rather than creating more work, this, if dealt with in the right way, should help reduce the burden on your officers. Thank you.
Communication is absolutely key. It would be a madness to say anything else. There has to be, it has to be a dialogue, and I'm very supportive of, as you've heard, neighbourhood watches and community speed watch, but also PACs. I think that there is a lot more that we can do to reinforce our PACs, and in fact I will be getting the chairman of all the PACs in Avon and Somerset getting together to work out how we can improve that communication. But as Nikki has said, you know, we have to work very closely with all our residents because you are the eyes and ears, and with a smaller workforce, and I can, you know, there is going to be a smaller workforce because we have a smaller budget, and when 80% of your budget are people, when there are cuts, that is the impact it's going to have. So we need to work very closely, and you know, I'm delighted, although I haven't yet had a look at the website because I don't think that launches until the end of January. There will be that communication, and we need to improve the communication all the time with residents out there. But just looking at my own mailbag, it is pretty apparent that by having a PCC and people are far happier to communicate direct with me, so that we can listen very carefully to what is going on, because with all these various meetings and groups, to me it's not the success is how many people attend. It's actually the success to me is how many people know that those meetings are taking place, because I still go to some forums where they say, why can't the local people and the local officers get together? And I explain to them that there are PACs, that there is other things, other forums. They're called different things in different places, and they still don't know about them. That communication, I think we can do much better on, and make sure that people do know that those access points are readily available to people who are interested.
I agree with virtually everything you said, except for the proposition that there's getting less and less communication every day. I think that we can prove that actually there's getting more and more communication every day of all sorts as the constabulary branches out into various branches of social media and other means of communicating. But I do think, I've talked earlier about how there will be a stronger corporate central grip and less negotiation about whether a particular beat team chooses to communicate or not. There won't be that choice. And if you've had a bad local experience, then I think we need to find a way of dealing with that. But in circumstances that don't turn beat officers into desktop publishing machines, they are crime fighters. We are the police. That we have a job to catch criminals and put them in jail, among other things, and we need to not lose sight of that. The Police and Crime Commissioner points out that the bad news is that the website won't be ready until the end of January. The good news is that the end of January is this week, and it'll be launched on Thursday. And don't all go on at once. but we won't put too intolerable a burden on it on day one. It won't be like the Monty Python tickets site. But the commitment is there to do more and more. And your analysis, I absolutely agree with. And it's something to work with, something we're working at, so please bear with us.
Can I just say that clearly different members of the community like to communicate and engage with us in different ways. So we do try and touch all those different ways. If you don't feel as an individual or people don't feel that you've been able to communicate with us, if you go onto the website to your area, you can find out who your local beat team is if you don't already know it, and you can contact them direct through the website and they will come back to you. Toby?
Thank you very much. My name's Hugh Gregor. I come from the same parish, Winford, that's looked after by the great Ray Bradley. My question's about special constables, and clearly you mention again and again you're in need of extra eyes and ears, in which case special constables surely have a part to play. This police news sheet has an article about special constables. And it's quite clear that they work 16 hours a month. You've got 20 of them already in North Somerset. But what the article doesn't say is what sort of people you're looking for to volunteer as special constables. Are there particular qualities that you're looking for? Are there particular tests that people have to take? And can the fit over 70s apply?
As the lead for the Special Constabulary in the force, I'll defer to Nikki. Safe to say that I've had quite a bit to do with the Specials since I appeared as chief, since I arrived as chief rather, and have been to one or two of their leadership functions, and have been trying to reframe the kind of self-image of the Special Constabulary away from being a fast track into policing. And I'd rather discourage that. Of course, we'll always get people who join the Specials to try it out and to kind of sit in a holding pattern or a waiting room prior to joining the job. But they get a disproportionate benefit at the moment. 28% of the people that we recruited last time round were serving existing special constables. And I'd rather effectively reduce that advantage that they get to an extent, whilst emphasising the value to society and to individuals of being a member of the Special Constabulary for its own sake and because of what it gives individuals and what it gives communities. That said, in terms of those qualities we're looking for in the process and how we might stimulate a greater flow of applications, we've actually been doing rather well recently, no doubt in part due to Nikki's leadership on behalf of the force. But we're doing okay, and I want to continue to do better for people to be specials, as an end in itself. Nikki?
Yeah, we have some fabulous special constables across the force, particularly in North Somerset because it's my area, and they do a wonderful, wonderful job. The recruitment for specials is open all the time, and all the information is available on our website, and there are strict criteria around becoming a special constabulary which I don't know off the top of my head, the most important thing is experience of life. You're dealing with people, so experience of life is the best quality. We really try not to be ageist in this organisation, but it is quite a physical job. So in your 70s, there may be an age cut-off. I can't remember what it is. However, if your 70s is too old to become a special constable, we have volunteers in policing, and there are some really fantastic roles that many volunteers take up across the organisation, which are working with communities, helping to keep communities safe, and they really helps us out. So there are lots of opportunities, whatever age you are, even if you cannot be a special.
At the either end of November or at the beginning of December, I can't remember which, I went to the last Special Constabulary training course. There's another one running now, but it was the conclusion of the last one to hand out the warrant cards and certificates and welcome our new specials into the organisation. And in fact, one or two of them who were there have subsequently been emailing me, telling me about their first arrests and things like that. It's all they're all doing very well. But I can confirm that unless there was a particularly youthful-looking septuagenarian, I don't think that there was anybody in that sort of in that age bracket. No, it's so. One must avoid the risk of stereotyping and reaching unfair conclusions, but I don't think there were any people in their 70s there. What did amuse me was the chief officer of the Special Constabulary made his speech, just sort of, he was the warm-up act for me as we welcomed these 16 fine men and women into the constabulary, and his crescendo, the peroration of his speech was the observation that this evening the thin blue line just got a bit thicker. Well, there could be, but...
True. I have asked the constabulary to increase the number of specials to 700 and also to increase the number of volunteers to 1,000, so that will be rolling out over the next few years.
You may have to become a special, but not to become a volunteer.
Thank you. This gentleman.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob Cook. I'm also a ward member for Wraxall, Fayland and Long Ashton. I did give you notice of a question, and I'd like to ask an extra one. My question was, in Long Ashton, we, for many, many years after a hard battle, we had 2 beat officers. We now have one. We have a PCSO who's on permanent sick, another PCSO who does very low hours, and the special constable who does very low hours. On top of that, the area covered by our beat officer has been increased tremendously, and I don't believe he can possibly cover it all. Can you help us with some more manpower?
Certainly the area that you live in has been struck by a bit of sickness with the staff, but I knowing that you were going to ask the question, I found out exactly what was happening, and I understand that the PCSO is due to return to work very shortly. We haven't, since I've been in post, we haven't reduced the numbers in that team, and it's not our intention to reduce them any further. We do absolutely, as Nick mentioned earlier, we look at the demands, we look at what needs to be done, and we do try and organise our resources according to that. There haven't been any reductions, permanent reductions recently, but we have had a bit of sickness which we're getting on top of, and hopefully those members of staff should be coming back to work shortly.
I'm not sure what you call recently, but it doesn't seem that long ago we had 2. But incidentally, the PCSOs, particularly the one who's been off sick, do an excellent job. Make no mistake about that. But could I ask you another question, because it concerns me? I've contacted officers of Nailsea Station back recently over some theft. There were some wood bins that someone was going with a chainsaw nicking this wood, which I was supposed to be having. And I was quizzed who the land belonged to. I said, well, what difference does that make? Because all I asked was, could I speak to the beat manager, beat officer? Oh, he's left. Well, could I speak to whoever's replacing him? Well, what's it about? And I thought, here we go. And I explained that this wood was being stolen. And what I want to ask was, if the police officer's passing, don't go to this question, because on a main road, right up on the main road, easy to see if anybody's there. If he sees anyone there, could he just quiz them? Because I can tell you they don't have any business there. And I was asked, well, who does the land belong to? I said, what does that mean? And I was told quite categorically, if we don't know who the land belongs to, we can't do anything about it. And I don't believe that was correct.
It doesn't sound like you had a very good interaction with us there, and it doesn't sound like you had a very good service. What I can say is that we're looking at all of our systems, and we have had some systems in place that have helped us manage our demand and haven't helped us deliver a fantastic service to the public, and haven't helped us address what the public's needs are. We are changing that. So it sounds as if the person on the end of the phone had their script and they couldn't deviate from their script, and they weren't listening to what you were telling them. But we've identified that that's a problem, and we are changing that.
You're only partly right, because they were talking about the telephone system. I went to the station,
Okay.
I spoke to 2 people there, including a sergeant, and they wouldn't budge from that fact, that statement. So could you just confirm it doesn't make any difference who the land belongs to? If a theft is taking place, it should be taken seriously by the police.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that.
This person at the... oh, right, sorry, this person here, the gentleman in the blue shirt. Blue jumper.
Thank you, Commissioner. Firstly, can I say how pleased I am to see an independent commissioner in Avon and Somerset, not beholden to any particular political line. I feel it's very important that politics is kept out of policing. However, politics inevitably does rear its ugly head, as we see when setting the preset, and the policing of government initiatives like the fracking sites in Sussex. With that in mind, I wonder if you have, or will be writing to the Right Honourable Owen Patterson requesting him to abort the immoral, illogical and utterly flawed badger culls, if you'll excuse me getting emotive. Surely the upfront cost and resource implications for policing these and the subsequent impacts that they have on us as taxpayers and residents is reason enough. Secondly, if I may, I've heard it said, I'm not sure if it's true, might just be hearsay, that the police, when policing these culls, take direction or refer to the NFU, and I wonder if the Chief Constable might like to give a view on that, confirm or deny. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, let me talk about the badger cull. That the issue whether we have a badger cull or not is nothing to do with the police. It is something that the government decides. DEFRA decided that this was going to be a pilot. It's an elected government, and this is what their decision was. What I and the Chief Constable worked very closely with was to make sure that, one, that the cull would be able to go ahead, but as important was to make sure that the people who wanted to protest had the absolute right to protest peacefully. Okay, so it was not a point, and I was not going to make any political points about it. That was very much the issue. Now, Nick will talk about the finance in a minute, but again, it was very clear that it was not for Avon and Somerset to pick up the tab on the overtime that was incurred on that. So, Nick.
I'm only too happy to confirm that we don't take direction from the National Farmers Union, nor indeed do we take operational direction from DEFRA. We did negotiate operational protocols about the operation, about the way the cull would work. It went very well here, from a policing perspective, in Somerset. It was less difficult, I think, than the policing operation that colleagues in Gloucestershire had, because we're further away from London, the area of the cull was less sparsely populated, the resident population was more unanimously, or a clearer majority of people were either in favour of the cull or at least ambivalent towards it, and a number of other reasons. We're a larger police force, it was just easier here. It cost us about £750,000, which will be fully refunded by DEFRA, where it cost Gloucestershire £1.75 million. And in terms of the politics, the rights and wrongs of it, whether it's fracking, the construction of Hinkley Point, animal rights protest, the badger cull, or indeed anything else, my view is that it's not for the police to take a view on whether those things are right or wrong. If it is the legal programme of a democratically elected government, then it's our job to facilitate that government doing its job. And if people don't like it, then the ballot box, not the police station, is the place to register their protest.
Thank you.
Hi. I work and interact with private rented sector landlords every day, many in North Somerset, but also on a national scale, who are trying to reduce antisocial behaviour and crime within their communities. So I wanted to ask, with the increasing numbers of people now living in rented accommodation and cuts such as the bedroom tax, meaning people are moving around a lot more, would you agree that residential landlords have a significant role to play in preventing antisocial behaviour? And if so, how do you propose to get more landlords involved in proactively improving their areas?
Officer.
I don't mind that.
Go on, you have a go to start with.
We clearly work with lots of partners to combat antisocial behaviour because it's always you get the best result from a joint effort. And we do work very closely with housing landlords, social and in the private sector. And we have meetings where people come together to discuss the cases that keep reoccurring. So the problematic cases, repeat cases, cases where vulnerable people are concerned, we discuss those in a group, in a partnership, and landlords are part of that partnership. Just very recently, actually, Sue launched one of the government's new initiatives we're piloting in the Mendip area of this force, which is called the Community Trigger. And that's where a member of the public or a community don't think that they're getting the response that they need in respect of antisocial behaviour. They can trigger a review of their case. And when they do that, all of the partners involved, including the housing associations, come together to look at, review what action has been taken, and if they don't think enough action has been taken, then ask for more action to be taken. And that is done absolutely in partnership, and we would get whoever we needed around that table to discuss the case, whether it be social landlord, private landlord, council, police, school, whoever. So we do work very much in partnership, but was there a specific case that you were concerned about?
No. I mean, I've been out with various housing providers. And in fact, I was also with Curo in Bath, and they've actually designed a house to train officers and agencies and local authorities to actually look for areas of domestic violence, because so often fire officers can go in to do a fire safety check. There are lots of agencies that can go in, and just by training and looking for some of the areas that can really help to communicate with other agencies about what may be going on in that household. So the police have worked very closely with housing providers, particularly with antisocial behaviour, and the integrated antisocial behaviour teams that we have across Avon and Somerset have made a significant impact. I was in Bristol working near Patchway, and they have an open surgery which the PCSOs and the antisocial behaviour team of the housing provider working together so that they can tackle the issues together. And I think that is a really key way of partnership working.
Thank you. I had a question. I have a question actually about something Sue said near at the beginning. But before I do that, I'd really like Nick to clarify one thing he just said a minute ago. Yes, we have a democratically elected government. None of their manifestos included either fracking or badger cull, and I'm sure that he would want to maintain, in a democratic society, the right of non-violent protesters because it sounded as if you were saying the opposite.
Oh, no, no, far from it. I agree with everything Sue said about the, our role. We position ourselves in a place where it is our job to ensure that a democratically elected government can govern lawfully and acting within the law. But of course, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't facilitate protest, which is also lawful.
Yes, I just wanted to give you the opportunity
Thank
to
you for
say
giving me that
second
opportunity.
part.
I wouldn't have wanted to give a misleading impression.
You know, having grown up in a place where a non-violent, peaceful protest was not allowed until I was there on the streets of the Hungarian Revolution. So I just wanted to make sure.
And we have had meetings with the NFU as well as with the peaceful with the protesters.
My question was relating to that to people, particularly young people in police cells overnight. That particular insight to this about 8 years ago, where there was I was called to be an appropriate adult for a young person at police cell in Weston-super-Mare, who'd spent quite a lot of the night there. It was unavoidable. He'd been persuaded by two of his friends to join in a joyride in a stolen car, which then ran out of petrol on the motorway. They found themselves hitching a lift from a police car. But I was with him for most of that day, and he needed some medication. He was getting increasingly anxious. And at the end of the day, when they were sort of discharged on the street, I realized that none of the three of them had a penny. And they had to get back to Gloucester. I took them back. Now, next time it will be Bridgewater. And I just really want, one is how, a person with mental health problems possibly might get into police cell. Not the police's fault at all. And if there isn't, how are you going to go about making sure, and it's not just your responsibility, it's Mental Health Trust and others, that there is more facilities. And if a young person like that find themselves in a police cell, then it is the police's, responsibility to make sure that they don't end up on the streets afterwards, and possibly in a more dangerous situation on the streets of Weston than they were before.
Yeah, sensible question. I mean, first and foremost, I think we should work to reduce the number of people in police cells who shouldn't be in police cells, and I'm sure that Sue may want to say a little more about that. I think the sound of a cell door closing on a criminal is a warming and reassuring sound that causes me deep joy every time I hear it. But I don't like to hear that sound when it's somebody who shouldn't be in our detention at all, where it's somebody who's mentally disordered, hasn't committed any offences. It's a terrible and tragic shame. But go to this question of Bridgewater. We're thinking this through at the minute, and you can't give a guarantee of a taxi ride home to everybody who you arrest, and we're not going to do that. By and large, the presumption should be that people who've been locked up will make their way home under their own resources, and in the vast majority of cases they'll be able to do that. By the same token, you can't say you'll never find circumstances where it's the right, humane and appropriate thing to do to make sure that somebody gets home. So I will be expecting officers to apply common sense within that type of parameter. But the real objective is to make sure that people in police cells are there because they should be there, and they're there because our officers are out there arresting suspects and doing their job fearlessly and confidently.
But sorry. Go on.
Just very quickly add, the beauty of the new facility at Bridgewater is that with the economies of scale, it's been built fit for purpose, designed to do the job. We shouldn't need to keep people in the police station quite as long as we may have done in the past, because we will be able to deal with them much quicker.
I've also said that as an aspiration that I don't, once we move into the new custody suites, that I don't think anyone who is mentally ill should be held in a police cell. I think he should always be in a health environment, because even though there may have to be officers there, it is the paramedics and the trained staff who can look after those individuals much better than the police officers, much better trained. Yes, sir. Sorry to have kept you waiting.
This is following on from what Jackie Bush, Chairman of Churchill Parish Council, was saying, and my question concerns the removal of a police presence from the villages. I think it's acknowledged that the best crime deterrence is visible policing, yet our last village policeman has now been posted to Nailsea, 10 miles away, which gives our burglars, of course, an ample opportunity to do their job and clear off before anybody can possibly get near them, even if the neighbourhood watch spot it. And I do not recall the last time I saw a police car, let alone an actual policeman in our area. If we could afford £1,400,000 now for the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, according to the council tax demand, surely policing the area is more important, and we can afford a motor car and a policeman somewhere in the area. Do you have any proposals to restore the policing of villages?
Okay, before I ask Nikki to answer the question about the specifics, let me explain to you about the finance of my office. I replaced the police authority. The police authority cost also 1.4 million and was a committee of 17 people. Now, with staff. Now, the Police and Crime Commissioner has a much wider remit than the Police Authority. I'm responsible for administering £2.4 million in grants. I'm also responsible for the Action Fund of 200,000. I'm also responsible of making sure that we respond to the 4,000 to 5,000 people who are contacting us and asking us to look into different aspects of policing. It is not, you cannot compare apples and pears, and I am very clear that I have a very slim team in the office of the PCC. I'd also like to say that we are below 0.5% of the constabulary's budget, and we are below the average of all other PCCs in the country. So if you have to have some governance of the police. I don't think there is anyone that's arguing that the police should not have anyone to scrutinise them, and therefore, as a PCC, I am considerably cheaper than many other PCCs in the country. But to go specifically to your question about Nailsea, I'll ask Nikki.
Well, this was one of the questions that was posted beforehand, so it gave me the opportunity of asking the detailed questions of my sergeants. And what they've told me is that we haven't reduced the number of beat managers or PCSOs policing that area, but a while ago they did stop the officer from coming onto duty from his home address, and he had to go into Nailsea to be briefed, properly briefed, tasked, pick up his equipment, have access to the computer system, so he had up-to-date information about what was going on before he then commenced his patrol. So there are operational reasons why he needed to start and finish his duty at Nailsea, but he still patrols your area.
Thank you. Toby, this gentleman in the front here.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner. My name is David Ford from the Admin Act. We did hold a meeting last week where we asked the members of the PAC for suitable questions to bring to this meeting, and most of them have actually been answered. There is the remaining one, if I can put it, and it's specifically probably to the Commissioner, and I'll read it if I may. It says here, the North Somerset Core Strategy identifies the need to build more affordable housing. If property developers are proposing to build in areas where the infrastructures are already stretched, that's the roads, the schools, the medical services, and of course the police, what impact do you, as a Commissioner, have on effectively challenging any planning decisions?
Well, let me be very clear that I work very closely with the local authorities, and by getting early sight of developments, I think that's been really useful. But can I just say that having spoken to an officer that worked in South Gloucestershire when there was planning going on. The fact of involving the police at a very early stage, then it was extremely helpful, just looking at the development of certain of the sites, because by looking at the design build of certain areas, by having the expert view of the police, they were able to make the particularly community areas much safer. So as far as the looking at working with the development, as far as my role is concerned, I do work very closely with all the leaders of the local authorities and get sight of what we are doing, and much more importantly, the constabulary gets sight of what is going to be in the future developments.
And of course, not only do we have an opportunity to bring expertise to the design, we also have an opportunity to make a claim against any levy that the developer pays. Some forces are conspicuously more successful than others in that regard. Strangely, my former force, Leicester, I didn't know to be proud of it at the time when I was there, but Leicestershire does extraordinarily well and punches well above its weight. We're doing some work here to make sure that we do similarly well, and ensure that even whilst it's not for the police to say who should build what where, and it's not even for the police to say what the levy should be, if there's something out there to which we can gain access and for which we're eligible, then we should be bidding for it and putting it to the use of a community safety function or community safety purpose.
I think this gentleman here waited a considerable amount of time to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner. Steve Bridges from Weston-super-Mare again. Far be it for me to preach to you, Nick, about how to run a police force, but I think that Weston-super-Mare have been very fortunate over the last 6 years, 7 years, because our beat policing has been exceptionally good, led by one PCSO and one PC, who, when they came in, the PC was due to retire, so for his last 6 years, he worked with us extremely well, and also the PCSO, who is still with us and has been with us for 5 years, and they worked up an extremely good liaison with 4 schools, that's both Sanford and Winston Primary Schools, Sidcutt School and Churchill School, to make sure that all the children and all the kids and what have you got to know them and got to know them well. They have built up the most incredible intelligence service around the community purely because of the time and efforts that they put in over a long period of time. And the kids started to respect them. It's amazing what you can get out of kids once they start to respect you. And consequently, we are almost a zero crime area. As you know, we are the 3rd best village in Britain to live in, to bring up kids, as stated on that thing in the paper the other day. And we're very proud of that, and so we should be. And I would like to think that with Steve Church and Emma Wright, who's our PCSO, that they've done an outstanding job in getting those kids on the right track, keeping them on the right track. We've had a number of restorative justice incidents where we've got hold of, we found the kids who did the graffiti, and we've got them quite publicly to get out there and scrub it off. And so they know the situation. And the great thing about restorative justice, of course, is they don't get a police record. So it's all built up very nicely. The beat manager and Emma have worked an extremely good system up, and if there's any problem that arises and they get the information from the children, they're straight round to the parents and they just start chatting to them.
Sorry, is there a question? I'm very conscious that there is, I mean, not that I wish to...
Can you assure me that you are not going to reduce the beat officers, and we would prefer to have beat officers. I've got to be very careful here because my present beat officer is still behind me, and he's brilliant, but he's only going to be here a year because he's just passed his sergeant's exam. He's been with us for less than a year. He's just passed his sergeant's exam, so he's going to disappear. And that'd be nice, but I applaud him for that. But wouldn't it be better if we had officers who are about to retire? We've got 6 years to do or something, and they take on the community. because they have got time to do it.
Right. You want the reassurance we won't be reducing the number of beat officers. You've already had that reassurance, and I'm happy to repeat it. The plain fact is that police officers have careers and aspirations, and they want to move on. I'd have been a bit glum if somebody had said to me as a police constable, you've got to stay here for 10 years. And yes, of course, there are some, and there are many are very difficult to turn that into a policy, but yes, in principle, what we should make is a basic expectation. If somebody goes to work a beat, I think a 3-year commitment is a sensible minimum that balances individual aspiration with the needs of communities and organisation. And if from time to time somebody gets a year into that 3-year minimum, passes the sergeant's exam, and we all think they're great, then it's probably in our interest that we waive it and let them get on.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to have to bring this to a close. I did promise that we'd be finished before 9. If you've got any questions that we haven't answered, by all means talk to us after this, or contact any of my team that are here or any of the officers, and we will make sure that we will get back to you. But I'm thrilled that so many of you came out, and I think it just goes to show that by making the Chief Constable and the Senior Command team available to you, that you are interested in their questions and answers. Thank you.